There we go. Let's turn to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 12. This is, again, this day holds a lot of things in place. Tomorrow, again, is usually called All Saints' Day. Tonight, All Hallows' Eve or Halloween. It was really meant to prepare for that day. Now it's kind of become its own thing in our culture, and that's fine. But as the church, we shouldn't lose track of the basic, back to the beginning, square one kinds of things that make us who we are as the people of God. I think most of Jesus' ministry, his teaching ministry, his miracles and all that, were actually meant to, of course, usher in the fullness of the kingdom of God, like God's way of ruling the world and the universe, but also kind of correcting views of what God is about that were wrong, right? That people, even religious people like me, religious teachers even, had wrong. And Jesus comes along and he begins sort of directly correcting those and saying, no, you've made God into this, but God is really more like this. And so here's another example, a big example of that, kind of a famous example of that, here in Mark chapter 12, beginning at verse 28. So Jesus is going along teaching all kinds of things. He's dealing with everything from what it means to be a leader, or a good person. He talks about good stewardship. He talks about even things like marriage. He's just kind of answering questions from people all over the place here in this section. So, verse 28. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Jesus kind of going back and forth with some of the teachers of the law. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, this teacher asked him, of all the commandments, which is the most important? Verse 29, the most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength. The second is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Verse 32, well said, teacher, the man replied. You are right in saying that God is one and there's no other but him. To love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is more important than all the burnt offerings and sacrifices. Now when Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, you are not far from the kingdom of God. And then no one dared to ask him any more questions. Going back to the basics is always important. I've talked about this a little bit before, but I used to teach guitar classes, and the first thing guitar students want to do is play something cool, right? Because why play guitar if you can't play something cool, right? There's a famous guitar. There was a game that went around it's probably still pretty popular, but there was a game that got really popular for a while. I never got to play, but it's called Guitar Hero. You ever heard of that game? Guitar Hero is this video game where you sort of simulate playing guitar along with this famous music, and you get points for how you play guitar. But you're not really playing guitar. You're playing a video game that's sort of shaped like a guitar. Okay? I know that doesn't make sense, but it was very popular. And this famous guitar player was asked about Guitar Hero. He said, hey, the reporter goes, oh, by the way, have you ever heard of that game Guitar Hero? They're using some of your songs in Guitar Hero. And here was his reply. This is kind of terrible, but funny. He goes, I don't play Guitar Hero. He said, no one ever got a date from playing Guitar Hero. That's a great line. But what he was saying was, hey, I play the real thing, man. And, where it's at is playing the real thing. You play the guitar. When you play guitar, just like any other instrument, right, you start out with scales, very basic things, right? I play piano as well. You play your scale exercises. I can do them even today. I first learned my scale exercises over 40 years ago, and I can do them. Okay, I'll show you. I think I can. I can do some of them right now. I'll do them right now. I'm from the pressure. Anyway, I made some mistakes there because I'm in a hurry. But I learned those over 40 years ago. I can still do them. I can do them on guitar too. I can pick up a guitar and just no, over and over again. And I remember doing those and hating them, not liking them. The teacher says, I get there excited about playing some real music or working on music that I've learned or a song that I think, man, this is pretty. I really want to play this. And I get there and I remember one time opening my book to that song so she would see it first and say, play that, so I could impress her and play the song that I learned. And she goes, time for scales. Come on. Don't you see the song in front of me? I said. She goes, oh, I see it. We'll get there. Now play your scales. That's kind of how so when I got to be a teacher of guitar, I'd have my little students there they were like from 3rd to 5th grade age. We sat in a little half circle with their guitars. I made them tune first so that I would stay sane. They have to tune first. That's rule number 1 in my class. You tune first, not later. Tune. Everybody tune. So we tune. We're sitting around, and they're excited. They've got their guitar, and they're ready to play some songs. And I went, okay, everybody, time for scales. And I got the same look from them that I used to give to my teacher. It was great. Isn't it great how that works? Let's play scales. Oh, we got to play scales today. Yeah, we have to play scales every time. Why is that? I want to play something good. I want to play something cool. Like those licks you were playing when you were warming up. When I warm up, I play cool stuff because I can play. But, I'm playing the scales, but I play cool stuff too because I get my fingers all stretched out. And I can play cool stuff because I've been playing for 40 years. But they haven't. And so I say, you know how I learned how to play the cool stuff? The scales. They don't like that answer. But it's the right answer. And I promise to them, if you will play your scales every day, if you will play your basic chords every day, then eventually, I promise you, not only will I teach you some cool stuff, you'll be able to just play cool stuff. That stuff you hear on some of it, that you hear on the radio, some of the stuff that your parents listen, you can play some of those songs. Some of the hymns that you hear, most of them, if you will play your scales and your basic chords, I promise you, you'll be playing some of those hymns in no time. Can we play those now? No! You can't. If you tried now, your fingers wouldn't do the right things. It wouldn't sound good. On guitar, you can kill the strings by not playing them correctly, and they just go clunk, clunk, clunk. You ever heard that? Not a good sound. I said, you will be clunking through it, and it will make us all sad. But if you will play those scales and get your fingers strong and get them in the right place, then pretty soon, man, you'll be playing. And those who stuck with me, at the end of our term, for our parents, we did a recital. And we played a few cool things. And the kids were proud, the parents were proud. Even those who weren't particularly strong guitarists ended up playing some songs. We played some hymns, we played a few songs that were pretty nice, and the parents, were happy, and the kids were proud, and they played the guitar, and they played actual music, not Guitar Hero, real guitar, with real songs that they could play. Now, some of them never went beyond that, and later I get parents going, could you teach them anything else, because they only play that one song. But others would come up to me and go, my daughter, she's now like turning on my old music and playing along. She's strumming along with it. And she wants to play in the worship band because she can play some rhythm guitar to the choruses that we sing in church. That makes me so happy, right? As a teacher, I'm just like, good for her. You know why? Because she plays the scales and she played the basic chords and she got her fingers strong so that she could learn to enjoy the fullness of the instrument. So, this guy comes up to Jesus and says, if you had to tell me just like one thing, one important thing, right? In order to really serve God, to be a part of this kingdom that you're talking about, that God had envisioned from the beginning that you are here to bring about, apparently, if you were to tell me one thing to make it work, what would that be? And Jesus said, play your scales. He kind of did. I mean, he really did. And the guy was kind of shocked at the simplicity of the answer. Here's what I mean. What did Jesus say? Without hesitation, Jesus goes, well, the most important commandment is this. Love the Lord your God. The Lord your God is one. Love your Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Well, here's why that's like the scales. Did you know that's called the Shema in Hebrew language in the Old Testament? It's out of Deuteronomy chapter 6. It's called the Shema. Shema is from the Hebrew word hear, like to hear. And so the phrase is the hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. They hung it on their doorposts. And when kids would come in and out, and adults would come in and out of the doors, they would touch the Shema as they come in and out. The Hear, O Israel. It's written there in Hebrew, and they would stick it on their door. They would touch it. Or they would write it on their doors. They would touch it every time they come in and go out. And from the time they could talk, they learned around their table, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Just like our friend here learns the Lord's Prayer, can say it beautifully, by the way. Because they've heard it over and over and over again, it became the basis of their faith. So Jesus was saying, hey, this hard question you just asked me, you've had the answer the whole time. You knew this answer when you were 6. And you just tried to make it more complicated than it needed to be. The most important commandment, Jesus says, is this. The Lord your God, the Lord is one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord. And I bet the guy started reciting it with them as he was saying it. Because he's like, I've known this since I was 6 or 5 or whatever, right? And then Jesus answers a question that he didn't ask, just to make sure he got the application of the first. Still with me? So this first thing he said, most important, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, right? And the second one is like it. In other words, Jesus is saying, if you want to apply that thing you've known since you were 5, here's what it looks like. And love your neighbor as yourself. These two, Jesus says, these are the most important commandments. Every other commandment falls under the umbrella of these two. In other words, I think he's saying, you can't really keep the others if you don't get these down. Kind of like what I say to my students. You can't play the cool stuff unless you know the scales. You really can't. You can't play the good stuff unless you know the scales. When you know the scales, you can improvise, you can learn things, you can get the rest of the songs, but if you don't know the scales, it's almost impossible. Jesus says, these two are the foundations of what it means. They're the basics. They're the things you circle back around to if you lose your way. If you get distracted. If you get discouraged. If things get too hard. Circle back around to the basics. Sit down and play the scales again. Right? Take a deep breath and play it again. In music, we call it woodshedding. You know the old woodshed idea. But the woodshedding, we call it, that means take this part that you can't play well and go to the woodshed and play it till you got it. Right? I played saxophone in high school, and jazz band and symphonic band. And the pieces are harder than in rock and roll and country music. So the pieces I was playing were harder. I knew the basics. I could play pretty well, but they're harder. And I had buddies. We were a good saxophone section. We were very tight. We really sort of wanted to be a really good section of guys that played. And we hung out together a lot. We were good friends, and we played music together outside of band. And so when we got into band and we had even a hard piece, we sort of challenged each other who could master it first, right? And of course, the director wants that too, right? And if he hears, he would tell jokes like, if we messed something up, because he knew we were pretty good and we could take it, he'd stop and he'd go, "What's the difference between a chainsaw and a saxophone?" You know that joke? And he'd go, "You can tune a chainsaw." He loved that joke. But anyway, so we tune up and challenge ourselves to go woodshed that. We'd go back in the practice room, we'd go home, and we would just play that over and over until it was so automatic. And we'd get to that section and just nail it. It was a great feeling. And we'd look at him and go, "Where's your chainsaw now, buddy?" That kind of thing. So he took it well. But I think what we circle back to in the Christian faith is, God, I want to love you above all else. I want to worship you above all else. I want to make sure that you are first, that your ways come first in my life, that you are one. I want to devote myself to you with all my heart, all my soul, all my mind, all my strength. I want to give my past to you. I want to give my present to you, and I want to trust you with my future. I want to start there. And when I start drifting, I want to stop and go back to that. Right? And make that my checklist. Is God and His ways, are those the most important things to me today? Chances are, when I'm drifting, I've let that drift too. Right? I've lost something there. So I want to always circle back to that. And then here's what I want to do. Once I believe that that's in place, my commitments are in the right place, I want to make sure that flows out of me, right? That comes out in real life. Because I'll end with this, but the musical, The Music Man? You know this musical? I'm talking a lot about music today. Let's be in a musical mood. The Music Man is about a guy who comes to Iowa, and he's a salesman, and he sells band instruments. But he doesn't know anything about playing music. He says he does, but he doesn't. And here's what he does. He tells the students they want to get their instruments and actually play. And he says, no, you're not ready to play the instrument yet. You've got to use the think system. You've got to think it. And if you think it long enough, you can play it. Which is actually not always true. But that's what makes the musical funny. But so he has them go around thinking it. We know. It starts there, yes. I mean, you got to think through it. You got to think through the music. You got to think through your job. You got to think through the harvest. You got to think about it. You got to plan it. Yes. But if all you ever do is think about it, you never play the music, right? You never get the corn. You never get the soybeans. You never get the chickens, because all you're doing is thinking about it, right? So that's why Jesus says the second one is also important. You've got to, once you get yourself right with God and aligned with making Him first and His ways first, then it has to actually be acted out. And here's how it's acted out. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's how you act out this devotion to God that you have. Here's what full devotion to God looks like in real life. As you begin to love as Jesus loves. You begin to love any of those who need your love and connection. You begin to offer yourself the way Jesus did on their behalf, to them, for them. See? That's what we circle back to. That's the basic scales. That's the basics of who we are as Christians. And although we never get away from that, the good news is we get to extend it and keep playing. Right? I mean, the greatest musicians in the world know their basic skills, but they play more than that. They play all kinds of cool stuff because they're able to sort of build on that foundation and extend the music and share it with those around them. And it's a blessing, isn't it? I mean, whether you're a musician or not, you ever just hear a really good musician? I mean, it's just kind of fun. Even if it's not your style of music. Even if it's not your favorite kind of music. I've sat and listened to musicians that they're playing music that's maybe not my favorite, but I'm going, man, she's good. You know what I mean? She's really good. I have a friend he's really into hip hop music. I'm not the biggest hip hop fan in the world, but he is. And I played him a Carrie Underwood. You know what Carrie Underwood is? Country musician, but beautiful singer, amazing singer. Former American Idol winner. I played him a clip of Carrie Underwood, and he just went, man, that girl can sing. Right? I mean, he didn't even like that style of music. He goes, Coach, you know I don't like that. I don't like that country stuff. I know. But listen to this woman for a second. Just listen to her for 10 seconds. See what you think. So I played a little clip on my phone. He's just sitting there. And he just looked up and he goes, man, she's good. She can sing. See, even if it's not your style of music, you recognize when it's good, right? This is why those are the most important commandments. Because even those who don't have a clue about the love of God and the goodness of God, when they see a life on fire for God, making His ways first, putting Him first with all their soul, their heart, their mind, their strength, and reaching out in love, they stop and go, I don't know what she's got, but it's pretty good. Right? Because they know, you and I we experience suffering. It rains on the just and the unjust, right? We get some bad stuff in our lives too, just like they do. Hard times hit us just like it hits them. But they see in us a devotion to God and a love for neighbor that they've never seen. That's foreign to them. And they can't help but stop and go, there's something there that's good. There's something there I need. We circle back around to the basics because that's who we are. Every time we say the Lord's Prayer, we say it often because we want it ingrained in our hearts and lives. We say the Apostles' Creed not just in some kind of formality, but because we want it ingrained. I believe this. This is who I am, right? There's a song about the creed by a guy, the late Rich Mullins, and he says, I did not make this creed, but it is making me. Get it? Jesus says, the most important two. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second one is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's the music. That's the music that comes out when we get back to the very basics of who we're called to be as Christians. Martin Luther King, his last major speech, last speech before he was assassinated, talked about what he would like to be remembered for. And he says it's not for the Nobel Prize. It's not for leading the boycotts. It's not for leading a movement. It's not for being the president of this or that. He said, I want them to say that this man tried to love somebody. Not bad, right? Not a bad thing to have said about you, right? He just, she really tried to love people. He really tried to love people. That's why we circle back to the basics of who we are. Because when all is said and done, they may disagree with you on specifics of the faith. They may disagree with you in other things. They may be combative toward who you are or what you do. But at the end of the day, Jesus says, when you keep these two major commandments, putting God first and extending that to the love of others, they will not be able to forget that, hey, he or she tried to love me. They tried to love people. That's what they tried to do. And that becomes God's magnet for drawing people to Himself. And that's what we're about. Let's stand together.